There's the story of how academicabuse.com came to be, and there's also the story of my memoir. They're kind of intertwined. So basically, I came from an at-risk upbringing. There was a lot of abuse in the home, and I saw college as my great escape. And so I got a full scholarship, went to college, and pretty quickly learned that it did not work the way that I hoped it would. Abuses encompassing discrimination, harassment, assault, bullying, blackmail, plagiarism from faculty, sexual assault, sexual misconduct, coercion, labor exploitation. It was just all the way through. I set about building academicabuse.com with the goal being to share resources, strategies for survival, how to identify different types of abuse in higher ed.
Welcome to Linda's Corner, where we bring more hope, healing, and happiness to the world. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about academic abuse. I'm delighted to welcome Julie Cruse. Julie was hailed as a pioneer of computational choreography by Dance Magazine. She is an inventor, instructional designer, content strategist, and the author of The Burn List, a memoir of abuse from home to higher education. You can reach Julie at her websites, juliecruse.com and academicabuse.com, and I'll include those links in the show notes. Welcome, Julie. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you for having me, Linda.
I am so grateful that you're here and that we are able to have this conversation, but it makes me a little bit sad that we have to have this conversation because it seems like the issues that you're talking about should predate 1960s.
Oh, yeah.
And the fact that there's still academic abuse and issues going on now, it hurts my heart. But we're going to have this conversation. We're going to help people become aware because becoming aware is an important part of solving the problem. And that's really what we want. We want people to be safe. We want those who have been hurt to be heard. And we want them to be able to heal. And then we really would like it to not ever happen again. Would you mind sharing your story with us, please?
Yeah. Do you want the 2-minute version, 20-second version? Which one do you want?
Well, I would definitely like at least 2 minutes.
Okay. There's the story of how academicabuse.com came to be, and there's also the story of my memoir. They're kind of intertwined. So basically, I came from an at-risk upbringing. There was a lot of abuse in the home, and I saw college as my great escape. And so I got a full scholarship, went to college, and pretty quickly learned that it did not work the way that I hoped it would. And it started early in undergrad and persisted through 2 graduate degrees, abuses encompassing discrimination, harassment, assault, bullying, blackmail, plagiarism from faculty, sexual assault, sexual misconduct, coercion, labor exploitation. It was just all the way through. Retaliation was very obviously a part of the program if you decided to try to file any formal or informal complaint that was usually pretty quickly punished. But I didn't catch on to all of that until my 3rd degree. And at that point, when I started seeing the same, like basically every time I graduated, I thought I would be better at the next college. I was just like, oh, that was just that place. That was just a pack of bad apples. And then I'll go to the next place and it'll be better. And I would see the same things, if not worse things, in the next place and the next place. And then, of course, I was reaching out, networking outside of whatever college I was in to professors at other colleges and experiencing abuse from them and sexual, harassment and things like that. That was when I started to get the program. Okay, so this is what's going on. This isn't just a one program problem. This isn't a one university problem. It's everywhere I've been. And so then I graduated and started working in higher ed and started seeing it even in the institutions when I was working in higher ed. And ultimately, that led to me resigning from academia altogether. A couple of years ago now, late 2023, I left and just decided, I didn't want any part in any of this anymore. And so I got out. And that was pretty much what motivated me to write my memoir, as that I felt it was a matter of public concern, that this is a pattern that I'd witnessed at that point for 23 years. And it was also a pattern that we discussed amongst ourselves in academia, but that also nobody felt safe discussing anywhere else except in secret. And I felt like that was a problem, like that we have so many public conversations about various types of, power abuses going on in society, but that higher ed, the sort of cherished ladder to social and economic upward mobility is where these kinds of misconduct are occurring, but that the victims and witnesses of it are being completely silenced, that they feel too scared to even discuss it. That seemed problematic to me. And, after 23 years of that environment, which is longer than my actual domestic abuse upbringing, after more years involved in that environment, it was unconscionable to me that I could endure that and not find a way to speak out about it, not find a way to address it. So the first part of that came from the memoir. And then the second part of that came from encountering another memoirist in the same space that I wrote my memoir in, which was sexual misconduct in higher ed. Predominantly, my book covers more, but her book is called Studies in Lechery, and her name is Cal Louise Phoenix. And I got in touch with her, and we bonded over shared trauma. And I said, "Well, yours is the only memoir I've been able to find in this space." And she was like, "Exactly." She's like, "Julie, I have had no luck finding other, comparable books in this space." And I was like, "Yeah, well, that's really something considering what we both experienced and witnessed." And I was like, wouldn't it be something if like there could be a place to go to see what this stuff is, what it's about, what it looks like, all these other things. And she was like, "Julie, that's a great idea." And so I set about building academicabuse.com with the goal being to share resources, strategies for survival, how to identify different types of abuse in higher ed, particularly because, and I know this is longer than the 2-minute version, but particularly because I didn't recognize so much of what was happening to me as a certain type of misconduct. Because when you're an undergraduate, nobody is explaining to you the code of conduct of faculty and staff. When you're an undergrad, you don't get that readout when you come in. So if you're being harassed and you've never been harassed before, you might not even recognize it as harassment. You might not recognize it as discrimination. You're 18 years old, if you're a quote traditional student. And when that happens and you don't recognize that it's happening, there's nothing you can do. So the first thing that I wanted to do is educate people on what these different types of abuses are that are happening. The second thing I wanted to do was, okay, now that you've identified it, okay, if you're experiencing it, then what do you do? And so I published my strategies on academicabuse.com, my strategies that I developed from 23 years of experience, strategies others have shared with me. Um, and as part of that, in the next couple of weeks, I'll be launching a podcast where survivors are actively coming in anonymously sharing their journeys through misconduct in higher education and their survival strategies, most importantly. So that'll be there too. And then the other thing I provide on academicabuse.com, there's also resources, there's books, there's literature that you can read. I'm in the process of I'm always curating new books on the subject, and I've got two that I'm in the middle of right now that I always think, wow, if people read these, what would they think? And one of them is called On the Wrong Side: How Universities Protect Perpetrators and Betray Survivors of Sexual Violence. So there's that one. And then another one I'm working on is called Broken Record: Gendered Abuse in Academia. And these are recent publications from like Broken Record was 2025. And On the Wrong Side, I think, was 2024. Let me double check.
So
20,
still very, very recent. That's wonderful.
yeah,
As you shared your
2024.
story, I'm so grateful that you have helped to create a space where people feel safe to be able to share their story. Because I
Yeah.
think part of what perpetuates feelings of shame and feelings of helplessness is not being heard.
Yeah.
So thank you for creating that, and I appreciate that. The main point of this is to help people be able to the word you used was survival and strategies, and
Yeah.
I would love to be able to take it even beyond survival and surviving into thriving. So hopefully that is but first we got to take step by step. It's sad. I am so sorry that you went through this, and I have some follow-up
Thank you.
questions because
Yeah.
this experience, I mean, I went through college and I didn't have any issues. So
Yeah.
it doesn't happen to everyone, but it does happen to some, and it should happen to zero. It should never happen, period. And anytime you're in a relationship with someone where they're in a position of trust, where you have, and it can happen in a family if it's your parents, that's a position of trust, or some adult when you're a child, or if you're in a church setting, a church leader, that's a position of trust, or if you're in any form of school setting where you are a student and you have a teacher, a professor, someone who's in a position of trust, it feels like this violation of trust is as harmful as anything that they actually do. That betrayal, I'm supposed to be safe here. I'm supposed to look up to you. You are supposed to be worthy of my respect. I'm supposed to give it to you,
Mm-hmm.
and you should be worthy of it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that matters. Okay, so one thing is, you said 23 years. So you were in
Mm-hmm.
higher education for 23 years? What degrees do you have? It seems like you should be
Yeah.
a rocket scientist and beyond, or brain surgeon,
Well,
or
I know that's funny that you said rocket scientist because one of my first majors in undergrad was physics. I wanted to be an astrophysicist. And then I discovered really cool avant-garde theater artists, and they kind of converted me out of science into dance of all things. So I have 3 years of a physics degree that I ditched and turned into a BFA in dance performance and choreography. During that degree, I focused heavily on digital media. And so then I did a master's degree, an MFA in dance and technology, where I concentrated on basically using movement and technology enhanced teaching to augment different pedagogy styles. And so then after that, I got almost a PhD in media arts and sciences, where I was focusing on multimedia learning, embodied learning, those kinds of things, embodied cognition. And the things that were happening there pretty much led everyone who was a PhD student to leave without the degree, including me. So we all left.
wow,
Yeah,
that's a
so
fool with a problem.
two master's degrees, almost a PhD, but no dice in the end. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. There's another thing I would like some clarification on where you said you did not recognize the abuse.
Mm-hmm.
What can you give me a scenario or an example of how someone could be? Are we talking like grooming type
Mm-hmm.
situations where
Mm-hmm.
you're too far into it before you recognize it? Is that what we're discussing here?
That is part of what I've experienced. Definitely. I think that really, quite honestly, it was very, in my case, it's so funny because all along the way, there were little violations that, people just accepted. I remember my first year in the physics program, I had an internship, and my supervisor would spend an hour to 3 hours talking my ear off before I was allowed to start my work. And he was like an old white guy. And it was very clear that I was 18, young, attractive female, and he just wanted to interact with me instead of letting me do my job. And so I like complained about that to the grad students, and they were like, well, you better get used to it. These guys really like to tout their big brains around in front of pretty young girls. And I didn't think anything of it, because that was my first time experiencing that. And I just was like, I guess I have to put up with it. But eventually I quit the job. You know what I mean? I quit the job and I left the department. And I remember at the time I was looking for other programs around the country that weren't predominantly male, and I couldn't find any. So I left physics, right? So that's the first time I was run out of a chosen career by that kind of behavior. And then I changed. I go into a dance program, and the I had another a staff member there was pretty clearly hyper focused on me, staring at me all the time in class, trying to talk to me in the hallways, and I kept blowing it off and trying to just non-verbally communicate, stop, you're crossing my boundaries. But when you're in that position, again, when you're in that position, it's very scary to speak up and say whatever you feel like is going on and why it's not okay, because then you could get on their bad side, and they have power over you, and they have connections with each other. They have power over your degree, aka power over your future. So where are you going to risk that? Um, and so, yeah, that turned into him asking me on dates, literally dates, coffee dates, dinner dates, and then eventually asking me to sleep with him and threatening my grades. And that was, a 4 year process when all that went on. And then he, after he was done exploiting me, going completely like what's the word I'm looking for? Like stonewalling me, no letters of recommendation, all the effort to try not to rock the boat and appease him was just all on fire in the garbage can, because he was done exploiting me. So he had no reason to pretend to be kind to me anymore. It was just kind of over. Um, and also in undergrad, I was cornered and blackmailed and by a professor who stole my intellectual property, used it for marketing purposes, and then threatened my degree if I didn't sign over the rights. And then when I didn't sign over the rights to my work, promised to retaliate against me with my entire faculty included, and kept that promise. I later found out when I went to grad school, and he had professors there who he was buddies with. So that retaliation followed me into the next program. And that's where I started learning about cross institutional loyalty and cross institutional retaliation. And so my journey was a really hard one and a very extreme one. I don't know anybody else who's had as hard of a time in higher ed as I have had. But sometimes I'm kind of a believer in I really hate cliches, but the whole everything happens for a reason thing. Well, you know what?
Mm.
Like you push this one too hard, and watch what happens when you do. And I feel like that's me. You pushed me too hard, and now I'm telling my truth and I'm telling my story. And it's not just me telling my story in recent years. It has been the number of publications that are coming out, and also the number of the scholarship papers that have been published over the last 30 years in this area, specifically gendered abuse in higher ed. There's a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's painful on so many levels, and it's not right. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the laws that have been put in place that we really hoped took care of this, like Title IX, which
Mm-hmm.
prohibits sex-based discrimination, and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which also prohibits discrimination. So, what are Do you know what the teeth are to these laws? I mean, what there's wonderful to say these things and hope that they come to be, but when you're in a situation where you are discriminated against, what can we do about it?
Yeah. So I have a lot of resources on my website about this on academicabuse.com, but just shortly, there's like a kind of chain of escalation. So, and it really depends on the environment that you're in, and it really depends on the stakes. Like it depends. Are you a student? Are you a staff member? Are you junior faculty? Are you senior faculty? Where are you? And I've known faculty who were female chair of the department and still felt afraid to come forward and still feared retaliation. So it's what to do about it is one thing. As far as the teeth of the law, that's another thing. And let me just go to straight what to do about it. Let's put aside, let's say, granular kind of subtleties of your situation. Number one, document it. Number one, journaling is conciliatory notes that have a lot of power in a court case. And also they help revive your memory. So you definitely want to be journaling, handwritten notes, dated. Also, if you have to have a private meeting with someone, you're going to want to summarize the events of the meeting and send them back to the person and say, is this your understanding of what took place? This is my understanding of what took place. But generally speaking, don't meet privately because then you have no witnesses. Another thing is to, if it gets to the point where something needs to be said, now this is where I'm hesitant to give general advice because it really depends on the individuals that you're dealing with as to whether or not it's a good idea to approach them directly. But I would say this having things in writing is very important. So, yeah, and it's also, there's nuances as to when it's time to file a complaint. But let me say this, okay? If you're going to file a complaint, you need to put it in writing. Like if you're going to go to your supervisor or your chair, you need to put it in writing. You can't just like vaguely ask for a meeting. Put it in writing. You say, I am requesting a meeting with you because an incident occurred that I feel may be a policy violation that warrants concern, or something like that. You don't ever hide it because then you have no evidence later. Okay, so here's the reason for that. If this university does not respond, as if they're negligent, if they show deliberate indifference to the complaint, the next tier of escalation. So, okay, again, that would assume like you actually went to HR or the ombud or something like that, and they show deliberate indifference. If that happened, the next tier of escalation is going to the if you're employed, the EEOC. It's like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, I think is what it stands for. And the reason you have to go there first is that you cannot sue unless you've gone to the EEOC. So you have to go through the EEOC first to try to mediate. So all along the way, you need to be thinking of worst case scenario. What if I need to take it to the EEOC? What if we don't settle and mediate through the EEOC? And by the way, settlements from the EEOC can go up to $300,000, but that's it. So you may never want to settle through them, but you do have to go through the steps. And then after that, you're free to sue. So when you see all these stories in the news about faculty and students suing the colleges, they've probably gone through all these steps to get there. It's a very long marathon. So that brings us back to documenting. You've got to have time-stamped emails, documents, everything for the EEOC to look at to show that, there was deliberate indifference or negligence or willful, ignorance, whatever they're going to say, and proof of harm. So definitely want to be going to doctors and therapists and having anything that's going on psychologically, physiologically documented. Yeah, these are just like the biggest, like 30,000-foot view kind of diagnostic steps I can talk through, but it
That's the
gets more.
best way to do it because we
Yeah,
don't know who's listening and what has happened to them. So
yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just recap. First thing is, I think prevention. I love that you said don't meet alone.
Yeah.
So I think an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Hmm.
I'm grateful that there are resources and that we can help to become aware and we can help heal. But man, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could say, wow, this happened to me. Please open your eyes and don't allow it to happen to you. So if
Mm.
and I'd like to talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but because some people I think are more susceptible to the
Oh,
abuse
yeah.
depending on what your how you were raised and what your
Hmm.
expectations are of people who are in authority. Um, but I love your advice. If something is not good, is not doesn't feel comfortable, let's just say even
Hmm.
just doesn't feel right, write it down. Put the
Hmm.
date. If there's an email or a text or something that's written that's not appropriate, let's take a screenshot. Let's save
Hmm.
that and put it together in a file so that you have something to work with. Because if it's just one person's word against another person's word, then it almost always is in favor of the one who is in that position of authority. So
Hmm.
thank you. That's excellent advice. So I'm going to step back just a little bit and just that idea of who is more vulnerable. And I think you were a first generation college student, right?
Hmm.
So I think we're almost primed for it in our youth. We almost attract, there's something about people who are predators who have a sense of being able to seek out those who are vulnerable. And it's terrible, but it's real.
Yeah. And again, this is part of why I didn't recognize what was happening to me because um, my threshold for tolerance of violence by the time I came to higher ed was really high. So, being screamed at, being threatened, having physical and sexual violence occur, that's just an ordinary thing in my home. How is somebody looking at me all the time and flirting with me going to register as violent or misconduct or abusive? It's not. I'm just going to be like, what the hell? Whatever. But then, seeing how these things ended up derailing my career and my degrees over time, it's looking back and seeing how they affected me that I started to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. Also, I think just real quick here, the only reason I think I did ever recognize it is that I got a job in higher ed and started managing students. And I had students of my own. And it was then, like, when I looked at them and I was like, how could anyone ever treat them the way that I was treated? That's when it finally occurred to me, oh my God, these things were horrific. These things that happened, they were such abuses of power. Like trying to imagine myself perpetrating that is what made me realize, yeah, I was abused. It didn't occur to me until I had my own students. It just because I was so used to it. I was so numb to it by the time I came there. But going back to your question, what makes people so vulnerable to it? That's one of them. If we're numb, right? If we're numb to it, if we've been through so much of it, we don't even see it. We don't recognize it. It doesn't hit our radar. Number two, being isolated. So if you come into the program and you're not making friends or you're not fitting in, people don't like you, you're opinionated, you are naturally finding yourself on the outs with faculty or on the outs with student, that's going to make you easy prey. Because then if you file a complaint, why is anybody going to believe you? You have no witnesses, you have no friends, people don't like you anyway, you know? Another thing that makes you vulnerable, any kind of protected class status. It could be being there on a visa. It could be being a person of color. It could be having disabilities that are declared. Um, Obviously, being first generation, having zero EFC expected family contribution. If you're, not financially contributing to the department, then do they have the funding for you? If not, you are expendable. I mean, there's a lot of financial realities that go on as well. Um, what else makes you vulnerable? immigration status. I think I may have talked about that. Yeah, anything that, oh, non-traditional status, if you're a bit older too than the other students, that can also factor in. There's a lot of different things, but just generally anything non-normative, non kind of fitting in, non kind of going with everyone else can make you a target.
All
There's
right.
something I call like a research threat too. Like if you're a high achieving working class woman and you're doing research that is what other faculty would view as competitive with their own, that can put a target on your back. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate having the warning and the heads up. That in and itself might be enough for someone to be able to, I don't know, prepare and
Yeah.
set some boundaries and to write some notes and to put down those dates so that you have evidence that what you are seeing and what you are experiencing and the timetable is valid. Um, it makes me so sad that this exists, but I appreciate you being here and being willing to have this conversation. Um, I'm sorry that you went through what you did, and I appreciate that you said everything happens for a reason because you have now become a champion so that other people can be heard and hopefully heal, and also that we can prevent. And that's wonderful. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we cover before we close today?
Yeah, just a few other things that occurred to me in the interest of inclusivity here, making sure I don't forget additional vulnerabilities. Can BG, excuse me, LGBTQIA status, sexual orientation, pregnancy is another thing under things that are covered under Title IX. So yeah, I just want to make sure I try to. Oh yeah, veterans, returning veterans. Just anything that makes you different can put a target on your back. As far as other things I want to share, yes. I would love for those of you who have tuned in today to head over to academicabuse.com, check out the resources that are over there, visit the data page and look up your university and see how many news stories have been published about cases there. I have a really nifty dashboard you can check out. And if you think that's really interesting, if you subscribe, I'll send you a weekly newsletter about the latest headlines of academic abuse from around the world. So you'll get those weekly. And then also, there's a petition and a recovery workbook on the front page of the site. So if you head over there, you'd like to help victims of Title IX violations, you can just sign the petition that would create anonymous complaint pathways for Title IX survivors. Why is this important? Because if the faculty member has threatened the victim, or the staff, or the coach, or the therapist, or whoever has threatened the victim, then they're probably going to feel unsafe filing a complaint. So, if we want to get these guys, if we want to quash the bad actors, victims need to feel safe filing a complaint. So please head over and sign the petition to allow anonymous complaint options. And then if you are higher ed affected, there's a workbook there called the Recovering Academic Workbook. And I designed it using recovery methods adapted from cult recovery, so high control environments. And I showed like the comparison of how higher education imitates and emulates high control environments and what are some of the steps we can take to start to take our identities back and heal from what we've been through.
Thank you. Thank you for creating and organizing those resources. What a hopeful, wonderful thing. When something bad happens, it doesn't have to be our story forever.
Yeah.
And that matters. So, Julie, thank you so much for visiting with me today.
Thank you for having me, Linda. Wonderful conversation. And your voice is very healing. I'm going to be just relaxing all day with the soothing sound of your voice. So thank you.
Oh, good. In closing, I'd like to share a quote attributed to Albert Einstein. He said, "The pursuit of knowledge must never come at the cost of dignity." Today, I invite our listeners to preserve our dignity and the dignity of others by ending academic abuse. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for tuning in to Linda's Corner podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends to help us inspire even more listeners. Be sure to visit hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free and affordable resources to help you overcome life's challenges. And explore healingbreathworkdetox.com, where you'll find transformative tools for deep inner healing and lasting change. Also, don't forget to check out my books, Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, and You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. Your journey to hope, healing, and happiness starts here.